When you're working with brushes in Photoshop, as I was in the earlier tutorial, you can see there's a lot of variety in the brush shape, but if you want to, you can also make custom brushes, which is kind of fun. So what I usually do is turn my colors to black and white by clicking on that little square there, and work with a pencil for the most part. Might be just a personal habit. I'm going to change the pencil size. I can do it here by changing the size, or if I'm in a hurry, I can use the keyboard to use the brackets to make it bigger and smaller. So I'm going to go with a small brush and create a little pattern of X's here. The reason I'm doing a little pattern of them is that doing one X is going to give me the same type of mark over and over again, but a little bit of variation might make it look more like an X texture. So once I've done that, I can select that area and go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. And you'll see in this little preview window, those are the X's that I drew, and I can name it X's. So I now have a brush that is made up of those little X's, and if I go to the brushes window, I'll be able to see my brush at the bottom of that menu. So I have a little brush here, and I can change my brush in all of the ways that you would change any other brush. So let's see how it looks at first. I'm just using it more of a stamp tool here. I can drag it. I can also affect things like the jitter and the different variations there by going to the brush settings. So if you'll recall that from earlier, or an earlier video, that I can play with things like what kind of scattering could this brush have. You can see down here it starts to show. I can multiply the number of that brush happening, the count jitter. Let's just see how that looks. So this is really giving me a nice scatter effect, and I can still change the scale of it. Bring the size down. The problem with a smaller size is that the pixels can only get, the pixels are just one size, so the brush can only get so small because it's made up of a lot of information. But you can see that I can still play with the hardness. Oh, no, you can't. I can play with the opacity. I can do something like that. And even the mirroring. Last used symmetry was that vertical symmetry. So custom brushes work just like any other brush, but the difference is that you can make it yourself. I'm going to back up. I'm just doing Control Z on my keyboard, see if I can get rid of all of these, and show you again how simple it is to make a brush. I'll go to, this one is my, show my recent brushes. Here was my recent one. I'm going to make this sort of squiggle line. I'll do another one over here. So instead of making a bunch of those, I'm just going to pick this one up using the selection tool, Edit, Define Brush Preset, and now show you how to use the change in color and the scatter option. So this is my original brush with a lowered opacity. It's my full opacity. I'm going to use the scatter here to create some real variation in angle as well as placement. So I'm doing this one here first. You can see that scatter is happening. But now I also want to work with the shape dynamics and do a little bit of an angle jitter. And the angle jitter will actually change the angle of my brush as well as the size jitter, which would create a lot more variation in the size that I'm laying down here. So the things that I want to emphasize here are the shape dynamics and the scattering for this. Of course, there's lots more that you can work with, but this is for me to create a more varied, convincing texture with my custom brush.